Hello?
What is going on there?
Hello?
Hi.
Mini Clipper.
This is Mini Clinton. Yeah, Samantha. Yeah.
See, I'll go, how are you?
Okay, is everybody in now? Welcome everybody to our seminar on Brexit, though we shouldn't be calling that now, I believe, by the government, but we still will because it's a convenient name for us all to use. And we're going to be looking at how we can actually be proactive and manage the situation going through to January the 1st, 2021. We've got some fantastic speakers for you today. And I'm not going to delay much more in talking to you, apart from just a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to go right through all the presentations. So can you put any questions you have into the chat box and we will come to them at the end. But please do put questions in there because we want at the end of this session for it to be very interactive and be like a general conversation amongst ourselves. So do put questions in there. If there's anything you want for clarification while we're going on from speakers, also use the chat box for that, and I will ask it that for you as we go through the presentations. So we're going to record this. If anybody has a problem and don't want to be on the recording, if they turn off their video, then it will just show their welcome screen rather than their actual physical picture. And that's it really. The video will be on YouTube afterwards and we'll give you a link so you can actually refresh and mind what was said, or you can pass it on to any colleagues that you want to who think it might be of interest to them. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, who's Sietske, who is one of the leading experts on the trade policies for the EU. Sietske has lived the EU for many, many years. I knew her in my past when she was the EU policy person for the FSB, the Federation of Small Businesses. And she's going to put in a different perspective that maybe that we don't always hear within the logistics world. So over to you, Sietske.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for inviting me on this panel. I'm going to share my screen because I have a presentation ready. It used to work. Yeah, it's here. A moment. Yeah, it's here. Should come up now. Show me. No. Ring your. 5 minutes ago it worked, of course. Start again. Right, I start again. Share screen. Oh, okay. Sorry. Should work now. Oh. I'm puzzled. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
See your desktop.
You see my desktop?
Yeah, we can see the
You see like a folded view and some icons.
Yes. I'm just trying to get Keynote on.
Do you have multiple screens or just one?
No, I just one.
Okay.
Why does it just work now? I'm just new share. Share. We were just doing it.
I know, it was 2 seconds ago.
Just like.
Open it on your desktop, straight into the program and then share.
Yeah, okay, sorry about this.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Things happen.
Is that possible? Right. quickly my documents. Okay.
We'll give it one more go. If not, we can get Peter and then you can put.
Yeah, it should be on my desktop now. Let's
Okay.
start again. Share screen. Share.
Some problem there.
Just having so much problems now.
That's all right.
No, okay. I don't know what it is. I really don't know. We just had it and it doesn't want to do it. Why is that the case?
What I'll do is I'll get Peter to talk, and then
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
have a go with
Okay,
the
thank you all.
laptop. Peter, do you want to come in? So our next speaker is Peter Ward from UKWA, the UK Warehousing Association. I'll leave him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Sue. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just hoping that I have slightly more luck here in terms of sharing my screen. Let me just see if we can get going here. Just bear with me. So far, so good. Go into slide view and hopefully,
Yeah, that works.
are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it, Peter.
Okay, well, again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Sue, for the introduction, and also to Serafina for giving me this opportunity to be with you this afternoon. First of all, I know we've got a bit of a mixed audience here, so a quick intro to the UK Warehousing Association. I've been with the association now as Chief Executive for 5.5 years, following a sort of career in the logistics sector in various guises. We're a business-to-business trade association representing those companies that are involved in, as you would expect the name suggests, warehousing, although I do find it somewhat of an old-fashioned description these days, given the high-speed, high-velocity, dynamic industry that we are. But the common denominator is 800 or so corporate members who are all practicing in the warehousing and distribution sector, who on an aggregate basis probably around, manage around 120 million square feet or 12 million square meters of warehousing from around 2,000, 2,500 locations across the country. So that's UKWA, and obviously invited today to talk about Brexit, and it's something that we've been involved with in supporting various government steering groups and working groups. And as Sue said in the introduction, we're not actually supposed to all been done, and we're now talking about future border strategies and so on and so forth. But we haven't bothered changing the slides because I think, as Sue said, we all now have got used to using Brexit as the descriptor. So I thought what would be useful would be to start off with this this well-worn slide of mine, which we started to put some sort of frame of reference around back very soon after the referendum. And I mean, you'll get copies of all of this afterwards, I'm sure, but the purpose of this slide was really to, as we went into all of these discussions around no Brexit, soft Brexit, hard Brexit, hybrids, Canada-style Brexits and everything else, what that all sort of meant and what would be included and what would be excluded. And I think you can see that we've moved from where we were 4 or 5 years ago as part of the EU with all of those parts of the single market and so on available to the UK, to this far right side of the chart, where depending on the final outcome of the free trade agreement discussions, and of course looking less and less likely now to get a free trade agreement signed up before the end of the year, we're right into this kind of hard right of the hard Brexit and moving everything towards World Trade Organization, rest of world kind of rules. So what does that mean for us in the supply chain and logistics business? Well, it kind of means that we're no longer looking at this as a kind of worst case scenario. It is now reality. And I'll leave to Tony and Susan, who are going to follow me, to talk about some of the detail around this. But essentially what it means is that for importers and exporters trading with those former EU states, a full customs declaration or a form of customs declaration is required for all. Based on the and again, you know, we've sort of had these out for quite some time, numbers that HMR have signed off on. It's going to take handling for rest of world traffic, which amount to about 90 million customs declarations a year, up to somewhere in the region of 300 million frontier declarations. So at the moment, we're now in the stages of planning for these additional 210 million additional frontier declarations, which will start to kick in on a phased basis from January next year. And as I say, Susan and Tony are talking a little bit more detail about that. What I was going to focus on was what some of the challenges around this from the logistics sector point of view. And actually, the last bullet point on this slide is probably one of the key concerns for us, and it's about the people effect and the staffing of this. And you'll be hearing some more announcements, I think, during the course of today and tomorrow around some further funding that the government are now putting out there to help traders and the intermediaries and the freight forwarders and everyone else actually get the appropriate level of staff trained to handle this additional business. And Susan may well address that as well. One of the big effects on us in the warehousing sector has already manifested itself over the last few years, actually, since the referendum, and that's been what we called the Brexit effect of the Eastern European labour that the industry has relied so heavily on for probably the best part of 25-30 years, has slowly been either going back to their home countries in Eastern Europe or to other countries in the EU. Not so much around the lack of confidence or the uncertainty in terms of what Brexit means to them, but simply the devaluation in the pound following the referendum means that, you know, they're not earning as much in this country as they were when they came. So we've got a fairly major impact in our workforce kind of supply within the warehousing and logistics sector, and I think that's a bigger issue that exists beyond Brexit. And as you know, the Prime Minister's talking about levelling up, then there's a much bigger political issue about this industry not relying for very much longer on this low cost supply of labour that it has done in the past. But it is nevertheless a big issue for the sector. The other thing, of course, that we've become used to during our course of our membership with the EU is the ability, through lack of any frontiers and so on, just to be in this kind of little and often supply chain. And another, you know, the biggest impact of this is probably going to be on the ro-ro ports, the roll-on, roll-off ports in the southeast of the country, who have been major facilitators of this kind of little and often supply chain, particularly in the food sector. And when you look at the UK food sector, both in terms of grocery retail or restaurants or any of the other outlets that we consume food in this country, you know, 75% of well, 50% of all of the food consumed in this country is imported, and 75% of that indeed comes into the country from Europe. And this slide on this image on this graphic on the right hand side of the slide here about being 4 meals away from anarchy, that wasn't a slogan that the UKWA invented or anyone else, I think, in the sector. This was actually something that MI5 put together in a post 9/11 study when the government asked them to look into what the effects of a major sort of catastrophe, aka 9/11, would mean, and they looked at examples of, you know, if Al Qaeda were to put a bomb in the you know, in the Channel Tunnel, what would the effect be? And one of the things that that study revealed was this farm to fork supply chain that we've developed. You know, whether it's oranges from Seville or whether it's green salads from Holland, what have you, but we've got this very fluid supply chain in our food sector. And of course, now that we're moving to these World Trade Organization rules on this, that's going to necessitate inspection of all animal, plant and forestry products. So some disruption definitely to be expected in the supply chains, or at least some interruption. Now, you know, this is not a complex slide by any means. Supply chain is a simple matter really of balancing flow and capacity to maintain the same outputs in terms of lead time, be they delivery times for exporters getting their product into the export markets in Europe, albeit the importers bringing products into this country either for consumption or manufacturing. Simple kind of Cranfield University day one kind of supply chain is if you interrupt flow, you're going to need more capacity in your supply chain to maintain the same outputs. And so in summary, this kind of likely interruption of all of these customs declarations and additional processes that are going to be required, probably good news actually for our sector, because more inventory in the supply chain effectively means more a need for more warehousing. So overall message, good news. Good news for our members. They should be looking at this as an additional opportunity to grow their business, but of course, with what cost? We already have evidence of kind of rent inflation, given some supply and demand issues, you know, in the market, and of course, you know, getting new warehouse stock into the market in this great democracy of ours is not an easy thing to do, given the somewhat arcane planning processes that we have to go through. And you know, if you've been following the PM recently, as part of his Build program, he recently announced that we really have to change this attitude towards our land use and kind of planning considerations. So again, I think, you know, the government are listening to us and starting to address some of these issues. So good news for the sector, but some challenges, I guess, along the way. And then just looking at what the kind of property boys are saying, 6.5%. Which is kind of reasonably good news. Lots of transactions going on. In fact, an update to this slide would be the reports that have come out in the last few weeks, where the big five, the Savills and the Jones Lang LaSalles and the CBREs and all of those guys have been reporting record levels of transaction for the first half of 2020, which, considering half of that period we've been in lockdown for 3 months, is quite a phenomenal situation. Now, very difficult, of course, to separate some of that growth and actually say, well, how much of that is related to Brexit and how much of that is related to all the other transformation of the logistics sector at the moment, as more and more activity transfers from the high street e-commerce, which of course, you know, COVID and the pandemic has gone some way to accelerating. So we are are expecting this trend to continue. We're expecting some significant growth in the sector, but as I say, challenging to actually break out, what the Brexit effect of that is going to be. There probably will be another round of kind of stockpiling as we get nearer to January, but our view at the moment is, and this is one of the reasons that we're doing these kind of webinars, and following some calls with government departments this morning, it's the start of the refresh of the kind of communications plan from government for this January. From our point of view, not a lot new to say that wasn't said in the run-up probably to 3 separate false dawns back over the last 2 years. And as you can see on the slide here, really, it's the same sort of message. Things are going to change, but really
Have we lost Peter?
Yeah, it looks like. In fact, I was trying to look for him, but I don't see him there.
Okay, well, Peter fortunately was on his last slide, so that was really good timing. And he's done a Brexit. So what I'm going to try now is to see if Sietske wants to get online and show us her presentation.
Yeah, let's hope this now works. Share screen. The same here. Do you see this?
We see you, but we don't see the screen yet.
I think you will soon. Do you see it?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Oh, right. Share.
So I've just had to log back in again. I get a sense that I was giving that. Sorry?
Do you want to finish off then, Peter, and then we'll get Sietske on?
Well, I realised at some point that I was doing that presentation to myself. How far did it get?
We got you right to the end. We got you to the end, to the slide you had with the street sign about the exit and the Brexit.
Okay, so that was it pretty much, Sue. To be honest, I was just concluding, I think, with this slide. Then, just to say, not a great deal of change really from us. A lot of the preparation, or at least where to find the information and what was needed, what was needed to be done by traders, that Susan, I'm sure, will cover. We did a lot of in the run up to the 1st of November. So it's just a question of changing the road signs and going through it all again. So thank you. Sorry for the interruption there. Back to you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, Sietske, do you want to try and see if you can get your slides up now?
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
There we go.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
better.
we've got it.
Wow. I don't know. Technology. Okay. Yes. So Brexit, how is it affecting your supply chain? I'm going to talk about multiple trade regimes in 2021. That is because the trade regime is a set of rules that you have to comply with. It is going to change. That's the legal environment, the commercial environment that we operate in. If you have a supply chain that runs through the UK and Ireland and Northern Ireland with Europe and the rest of the world, you need to be aware as a business, what is the jurisdiction I'm operating in? What are the rules? Now you may say trade will go through anyway, that's fine, but as a business you have to do your due diligence and know what you're doing. So I'm going to explain how the trade regimes that we operate now, are going to change. Today we were expecting an announcement of the government on how they're going to manage the situation in Ireland, Northern Ireland, goods coming in, going into GB and vice versa. We have not found anything. It's a big to-do list what they have to do. Businesses there need to know. They need to know desperately. But we still don't know what's going to happen. I will keep you posted. Okay, let's go to the first slide. So first, I think that the previous speaker has already alluded to this, what happens. The main thing to remember is we will become a third country. And a third country is a country outside the EU's structures, so outside the EU customs union, outside the single market. And these countries have a different status towards the EU. So if you're a business from a third country, like the US or Australia, you trade on different terms with EU countries than we do now. And that is because we are part of an internal market and we will be outside that internal market. So what Peter was alluding to about Norway, Switzerland and all these models, of course, as he rightly said, we're not talking about that. We're talking about WTO terms, World Trade Organization terms, and a trade deal. I'll explain how these relate to each other. But what you have to keep in mind is that we are a third country, and with all the documentation that I'm going to refer you to, it talks about third country status, and that's what we are. Also, the EU and EU countries are a third country towards us, compared to us. So they will also not have automatic access to our market. They will have access on WTO terms to our market as well. That's good to keep in mind. This is a graphic, very schematic map of Europe and third countries. You see the red countries are the third countries. It's not the whole world because that doesn't fit on the map. You can see Northern Ireland's special situation, half in, half out of the single market, the same as Switzerland. And then you see to the right, the Eastern European countries, some are inside the EU in internal market and some are not. The European single market is bigger than the EU. It's 29 countries from January, now 30. Because the European single market also comprises the countries from the European Economic Area plus Switzerland. So that's Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. So what will happen in January is that we lose that free access to that market of 29 countries in total. Okay, what the situation now is in terms of trade regimes, we have basically two sets of rules. We have EU legislation, that is the blue lines you see here all. I don't know if you can see my cursor. No, that doesn't work. The blue lines are the trade directions in this area, so Ireland and UK. And because UK legislation is incorporated in UK law and in Irish law, it's blue everywhere because there's no separation between UK law and EU law. It is the same, and that's why Brexit is a very legal process. We're going through that separation. The orange line is the EU's international trade policy. So that's the trade deals that they conclude. That is their WTO schedule, the World Trade Organization schedule that we trade on. So if your supply chain has a route on this map, the two things you encounter is domestic legislation, which is EU legislation, and possibly EU trade deals or the EU WTO terms. So until the end of the year, for example, tariffs, the external tariffs will still be the EU tariffs and not the UK tariffs. They will change to UK tariffs as of January. They're not very different from the EU tariffs, by the way. Of course, we are negotiating a trade deal, and that trade deal should improve market access on World Trade Organization terms. So what is the difference between the two? How do they relate? Well, third countries in principle trade on World Trade Organization terms, and the World Trade Organization is an organization of 164 countries, and they have basic trade rules. And the principle of these trade rules is that you indicate in a document, it's called a schedule, what your tariffs are, what your access to the services market is, and that is, you have to apply that to each country in the WTO. You cannot discriminate against another country. This is called the most favored nation principle, MFN, and the tariffs are called MFN tariffs. Maybe you know all this already, but I'm just explaining so where things come from. Then free trade agreements can improve on that market access. The EU has several trade agreements, about 35. There's several shapes and forms they take. And they improve on market access where they, in areas that they agree a trade agreement on. So it's not like you have the WTO regime and then a trade agreement replaces that. It replaces that where in areas where there's a trade regime. For example, the Canadian trade agreement has no provision on the audiovisual media services sector. So for that sector, that is the WTO rules that apply. So you always have to go back to the WTO rules. What are they? And I advise businesses to look at that. That's the baseline, and we may get an improvement in the form of a trade deal. And we don't know that yet. We'll only know just a couple of weeks or maybe the last moment. So therefore I advise, go for that WTO scenario. Okay, what will we have? This looks like a complicated picture. So you see, if you go back to the blue line is what they call the acquis communautaire. So the EU legislation, that's also domestic legislation in EU member states. So that's blue. In Ireland, you see that when Ireland trade with other EU countries, that's EU law. So that will change the UK, of course. We will have domestic legislation. We will separate out the EU originated legislation. So therefore I have given that the color red. So that is domestic trade. If you trade from Northern Ireland to the UK for GB, that's of course a domestic transaction, so domestic laws apply. Now you see the orange one is still there. From Ireland, Irish businesses, when they trade with Canada, they can benefit from the Canadian trade deal. When they trade with another country, when rest of the world countries come into Ireland, they will have to apply, the Irish have to apply the EU schedule and the EU tariffs. Now the UK is also going to have an independent trade policy, and that is the yellow line. I heard this morning that the trade deal with Japan has made great progress, and we can expect something in September to come through. Also, there has been the first round with New Zealand. So there is some progress there. That's going to be the yellow line. That's going to be the UK international trade set of rules, and that is the set of trade agreements they negotiate, and also the UK WTO schedules that have been lodged with the WTO. Now the purple line, that is the UK-EU trade agreement. That is that deal that we are hoping for that will happen. And you can see the trade directions in which that trade agreement applies. Now we have a complication here, as you all know. I started my talk about that, is Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is basically in the single market for goods, but it is in the UK as well. So Northern Ireland straddles the two single markets, the UK single market and the EU single market. And that's of course complicated. We have the Northern Ireland Protocol, and as said, we were supposed to hear today how that will be implemented. We don't, because it's complicated. That Northern Ireland Protocol is meant to keep the border open, as we all know, between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And it is a solution for how the two customs entities, so the UK and the EU, can coexist without having that border in Northern Ireland. So the border is moved to the Irish Sea. Now, in terms of trade regimes, if we go to trade from, let's follow the area Northern Ireland to Ireland and vice versa, we know that goods will move freely because Northern Ireland is basically in the single market for goods. So no tariffs, no checks. However, I have made this a dotted line, and it is dotted with the purple line. Why is that? That is because if you move a good from Northern Ireland and that good is accompanied by a service, then that service will fall under the UK Free Trade Agreement, and the good will move under the Northern Ireland Protocol. So you have a dual trade regime applicable to one transaction. Of course, this sounds very theoretical, but you have to know what you're doing. Also, when I give an example, a Northern Irish business is a boiler engineer, installs combi boilers in Southern Ireland. The boiler just moves without problems to Southern Ireland, also the engineer, because there's the common travel area. But then this engineer has a specific UK license for installing that boiler. Going forward, Northern Ireland is not obliged to accept that license. It may require, you need an Irish license to install the boilers in Southern Ireland. And therefore, it's a mixed regime. So in the UK Free Trade Agreement, EU-UK Free Trade Agreement, there will be a chapter on services, and that chapter will talk about recognition of professional qualifications or of qualifications or of licenses. And if there's nothing in that chapter about recognition of licenses of boiler engineers, for example, then yeah, you could be required to comply with the local legislation in Southern Ireland. Another reason why this is a dual regime is for VAT reasons. So the boiler itself is, if it's for a consumer, that's EU VAT rules. But the service of installing and maintenance of the boiler should in principle have different VAT rules, because it's a service, and it's a service that moves from a third country to another third country. So you have to look at the VAT situation as well. It could be quite different. I don't personally know what the outcome will be for that, but you have to be aware that you are in a trading from one VAT area to another. Okay, that's very mixed regimes. The same is true for very famous from Northern Ireland to GB, and vice versa from GB to Northern Ireland. We have, as we all know, checks on goods, especially food products and animal products. This is not only because Northern Ireland is in a single epidemiological unit with Ireland, but also because these goods might move towards Ireland, and then EU rules on sanitary and phytosanitary rules will apply. And that border is now in the Irish Sea. So therefore, moving goods from GB to Northern Ireland will have two trade regimes applied to it. So the UK domestic rules, of course, if you don't move your goods forward to Ireland, and then the Northern Ireland Protocol. These things you have to consider. And the same mixed regime is true when you trade with the rest of the world. If the goods come from the rest of the world into Northern Ireland and they stay there, that's no problem. If they move on, then look at the Northern Ireland Protocol, what happens to those goods when they move on to Ireland, and also look at the tariffs, because there could be one tariff regime of the EU or the UK, and what happens, where you move the goods depends on what tariff you pay. So this looks all quite complicated. It reflects all trade directions. You know, in the supply chain sector, you know that which routes are more frequented and have more volume than other routes. I don't know this. This is just a theory of all the rules that apply on all these trade directions. Okay, quite complicated. As I said, trade will probably go through, but you need to know your legal situation. Where can you find information? I've limited myself to government information. There's many parties, and I'm sure people here have more information as well. You may know there is a website from the government. I click on this, see if that works. Yeah, it should work. It's a bit slow. It's the government transition website. Here it is. And it has a checker tool. I will not do it now. I will not start it up. But you put in your sector, your product, and where you export and import, and then it throws up a number of guidance notices that I recommend reading. Now I have to go back to Zoom. Oh, where am I? Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I knew it. You can still see me, I suppose. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen if you just want to go to your presentation.
You can see my presentation.
No, we can't. We can only see your desktop.
Oh, there we go again.
Yeah, I think you may have to slide it across.
I said,
Just...
you probably need to log off and log back on again because it'll taken it off the screen.
I should not have done this. I should not have done this. That's a shame because I wanted to show you something more exciting.
If you just unshare your screen and reshare it, you'll get it up.
Yeah, okay. And then share screen again. Share.
I think last time you slid it across. I don't know if you can do that on a Mac.
Right, I'll just talk you through while I'm multitasking, trying to get it back on. The other link I wanted to show you that I'm not going to do is the EU readiness notices. I don't know if you've heard from that. So the EU has published a series of guidance notes on what it means for businesses to trade with the EU as a third country. And that's basically the WTO scenario and what does it mean. I recommend you look into that because they are I find them clearer than the UK information, to be honest. UK information is more accessible in terms of language, but I find for legal certainty, I would recommend EU documents. Stop sharing. Share screen. One more attempt. No, it's, I don't know. That's a shame because I wanted to show you my Brexit maps. I made a Brexit map when 2 years ago we were trying to get businesses ready for Brexit, but because it was postponed all the time, nobody was interested. So we used the time to create some tube-style Brexit maps, indicated what would happen with Brexit and what issues you have to think about. I can send it out and share it with you that way. Because this doesn't work. So yeah, so in short, this is a very abstract theoretical talk, but you have to be aware of the legal environment you're operating in. That's my message. Forget about a deal, just look at WTO terms, and in the course of time, we may have an improvement on those terms. We may have trade facilitation that's a bit better. We may not have tariffs. We may have better access to the services market, etc., etc. But my prediction is that this will be the deal. If we have one, it will be very bare bones, and that we will keep negotiating. So take the WTO scenario as a basis, and the links I've given you that we can send around are based on this scenario as well.
Sietske, I'm just going to see if I can get it up for you.
No, it's fine. We will send it afterwards. It's fine.
Okay. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So, Tony, do you want to come in now and tell us a live case study?
Okay, thank you, Sue. I think you should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so my name's Tony Leach. I'm the Global Supply Chain Director for James Cargo Fulfillment. We're very much a service provider, offering 3PL, third-party logistics services, global freight forwarding, and logistics and fulfillment services for our customers globally. So when we look at Brexit, we look at it from a global perspective. And how it can impact our clients across the board. So from our side, it's really looking at how these discussions with the EU are kind of faltering, and there is a very distinct possibility of a no-deal crash out may be likely. So we have to work with our customers to protect their supply chain, protect their sourcing, and also protect their flow of goods to what is ultimately their end customer or end consumer, or even into manufacturing in the UK or overseas. So I'm going to very, very quickly touch on the current situation, because I think everybody kind of knows where it is. But obviously, as of 31st of January, it will be 2021 actually, is it? The UK will stop being a member of well, we're already not a member of the European Union, but obviously we will see what that transition period will look like in January 2021. There's a couple of highlights here that I wanted to cover, and that was just what sort of goods are exported and services are worth to the UK market of 291 billion to EU countries in 2018. So it makes up about 45% of our exports, and obviously imported goods and services is actually a little higher in terms of 357 billion from the EU. So it accounts for about 53% of all our UK imports. So from a supply chain perspective, it is critical that we do maintain flow of goods in both directions, and have the correct, should we say, logistics and supply chain standards and best practice in place to support that. So a big part of our job when we work with our customers, and my team's job, is really to consult with our customers, not just from how we move the physical goods, but what are some of the other complexities in terms of doing a Brexit readiness audits and a kind of complete review of our client's business to prepare for the challenges and, in some cases, opportunities ahead. And I guess the big ones are customs and compliance reviews, because obviously there is going to be some procedures and regulation changes which apply to their businesses post-Brexit. What is their import and export strategy in terms of where they're sourcing from and when they're potentially selling to, and what modes of transportation are they using and how that will impact the physical supply chain, as well as the sort of administration overheads and new legislations and documentation. And also, is there opportunities with new international markets brought about by Brexit that they can expand into? Because what we want to do is look at whether there are moldable revenue and profit channels for our customers outside of Europe, because, you know, we have to look on the bright side as well as some of the challenges. So one of the first things we do is a planning checklist, and I'm not going to go through each one of these points, but I have kind of bold text some of the ones that are probably more important. So if we are trading under WTO rules and tariffs, obviously that does change the free movement of goods, and it's likely that new tariffs and VAT procedures would be introduced, which can obviously change the way in which we import, meaning that we have to do physical imports rather than sort of intrastat declarations, and that free movement of goods changes dramatically. So one of the key things will be for our customers to obtain a URORI number. That means that with that URORI number, they can be an importer of record in the United Kingdom, and most of our customers are obviously VAT registered, so that will be linked to their VAT number. And that's also important as well if they're selling into Europe, that their customers, especially for B2B transactions, not so much for B2C and e-com, but their customers also are URORI registered in the EU or their individual countries, and that will enable them to trade effectively and obviously manage those customs clearances potentially, or at least record and keep record the requirements and customs paperwork. Check for any new licenses, permits or approvals you may require to now trade with the EU, and also especially in terms of certifications. We've moved a lot of PPE in for Asia recently, and some of the new UK legislation in terms of labelling and in terms of certifications has meant that the manufacturers in Asia have had to ascertain that certification or those licenses to effectively long-term trade with the UK. So there's a change for us when we're actually speaking in this case to to suppliers in China and Southeast Asia. But that is obviously will apply to into European business as well. So it's very important. Ensure that you understand what are the customs paperwork and record keeping requirements, and that's even if you defer your customs clearances as well and work with some of the government schemes, which I'm sure Sue will talk to you around. But it is really important that you understand what those record keeping requirements are and what is expected of your business in terms of being compliant. Obviously, review the effects on cash flow. You know, do you have to store more inventory? Is there additional cost? Will your payment terms change with some of your suppliers or some of your customers? Or do you see additional impact on tariffs, administration, etc.? So it's really important that you understand how that can impact your margins and fully prepare for that. And obviously as well is that some of your contracts with your suppliers may change, especially in terms of things like Incoterms, because you know you want to know who's responsible for the customs clearance costs, if there are any, for duty and VAT, whether you're responsible, whether your customers collecting from your door and then they're responsible right the way through to delivery. So look up Incoterms, make sure that you understand your contracts are up to date, and any post-Brexit changes, who is responsible for the cost of the, you know, of the supply chain and responsibility for tariffs. That's very, very important. And there's another, should we say, maybe some more softer considerations, but it is really about mitigating risk and ensuring that you're compliant. So one of the things that, again, I'm sure Sue will talk about, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but we've under WTO rules and also the UK government have outlined a new UK global tariff. And looking at the goods that you potentially import from Europe, it would be good to actually go to the UK tariff website on the gov.uk website and check your commodity, check your products, and see if there will be any tariffs applied to them. The government have made it, I think, as kind of friendly as possible in terms of reducing some tariffs on, should we say, mission critical goods, or making it as light as possible, but there is some tariffs that have been introduced or even increased. So it's really worth checking that out and seeing if you will be liable to pay some of those tariffs on import and what impact that will have, again, on your cash flow or on your management of your supply chain and carrying out those customs clearances. And also, you know, if you have got a 3PL provider or a logistics partner, speak with them in terms of the process, see if there is options for deferment, and talk to them through the process of actually managing customs clearance or record keeping on your behalf to facilitate the movement of goods as best possible. So I'm going to go off tandem a bit here and just do a bit of a case study and a real world situation in terms of one of our global fashion customers. So we work with a UK fashion brand. They have stores in Europe. They have a couple of stores in Europe, and their biggest platform is e-commerce orders. So they probably average about 25,000 to 100,000 orders across Europe every week. And it's really interesting how that split works, because we will import their goods probably globally from US, Asia, and beyond into the UK currently. That was the original process. And then we would pick and fulfill those orders and push into to European consumers who are buying their products on channels. Now, this can change, because what would happen is if we was to maintain their inventory in the UK, it could very dramatically change the customer experience for people buying in the EU. And the reason that could be is that they may order, and because the products will almost certainly, it's quite high value products that will almost certainly go beyond any de minimis values, their country will probably look to apply tariffs and duties on that product being imported. So our customer has a choice. Do they pay those tariffs, and do they send it delivery duty paid, so the customer has more of a seamless customer experience? Or do they expect their customers pick up those tariff and duties, which adds a lot of pain and may reduce, obviously dramatically reduce the customer experience and increase the cost for the customer to buy? Or do we look at it for another way? And what was really fascinating about this exercise, and we'll talk about the challenge now, but what was fascinating about this exercise is we've looked at about 10 of our e-commerce customers in terms of B2C, and all of them have pretty much the same sales ratios, where 50% of their consumers are in the UK and 50% are in the EU. So if you look at that, it really is a split down the middle. And obviously they want to keep all customers happy and be able to have uninterrupted supply to those consumers. So the challenge for us is that we've got a US business that doesn't necessarily understand the complexities of European politics and Brexit, that want to have zero disruption in their supply chain and maintain the best possible customer experience. So we looked at all of the different challenges, things such as port congestion, carrier network congestion, extended lead times, new customs regimes, added administration, possible introduction of, as I say, customs and duties, risk of paying double duties as well, which is really important, because what you don't want to do is import into one European country, move it under your name to another, and then pay duties again. So that can get very, very expensive and very quickly damage your margins. Impact of additional inventory holding locations possibly, and obviously additional inventory holding if they want to stockpile. Additional costs within the supply chain, impact on customer experience, risk of interruption and flow of goods. So these were our challenges. So we sat down with a customer, we did some planning, and this customer is big enough to kind of support this kind of supply chain solution. But I talk about some small, medium size businesses as well. So what we looked at is that we have our facility in the UK, and we also decided to open a warehouse in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, which obviously sits within the EU. And both facilities, we're just completing the bond, so a customs warehouse in the UK, and the Netherlands warehouse is already a customs bonded warehouse. And what that means is that we can import goods globally or outside of our kind of customs remit into those warehouses and hold them under bond. So effectively those goods have not been cleared, customs cleared, duties paid, VAT paid for circulation within those regions. So effectively they are still not customs cleared products. So we can hold that in inventory, and then we can drip feed or release them and customs clear them as is when that product becomes needed. So that's really, really kind of a good way of looking at not paying double duties because it's not actually cleared. What that means then is that our customer can forecast and say, okay, this week we need to release X amount of stock, and then that will go into circulation and we can fulfill locally. The difference is now though, is that they do have to manage two different inventory holdings. So there's an inventory holding in the Netherlands and there's an inventory holding in the UK. Now, fortunately, they got very good forecasting, so they can pretty much get their stock levels right in terms of 50% of stock goes to the Netherlands, 50% goes to the UK, and that will be enough to fulfill the order demand. However, there is going to be occasions when we need to move inventory between locations, and we can do that on what they call a T document. And what that means is that during that move, it effectively stays in bond and will only be cleared when it reaches the UK or vice versa reaches the Netherlands. So again, it takes away that risk for double duty. We haven't imported it into the UK, cleared it, then had to re-export it into the Netherlands in a no-deal scenario, and then pay duties and VAT again. We're effectively holding that product as in an uncustoms cleared state as such. And a T document transfer enables us to move products in bond. So we can be quite clever in terms of the way in which we position stock and then move it around. Why did we choose the Netherlands? And I just thought I'd just give you a quick overview on that. One is they have a very good trade and investment policy that is very open to the world. They have a great port infrastructure. They have the biggest seaport in Europe in Rotterdam, and obviously Schiphol is an international air hub. An extensive gateway to Europe from a logistics point of view. Many multinational logistics companies work there. Very straightforward for us to set up a business and to incorporate. Obviously access to the European Union, and we can work with all of our common major small package carriers such as UPS, DPD, DHLs, postal services, etc. And obviously from a kind of political logistics, climate, corruption, ease of doing business, all of those were very, very strong. So, and the Dutch tend to speak a lot better English than I do. So it was a really, really, really good, easy kind of incorporation for us and a decision to make. And that was just why we chose the Netherlands. One of the other benefits to our customer is that what we needed to do was control costs, because although we can keep it reasonably cost neutral in terms of our transactional and warehouse storage charges, etc., are very similar, UK and the Netherlands, and they're not effectively going to be taking up any more space or any more resource within our warehouse. there still is that management overhead of running 2 sites, and there is a slight increase for holding bonded stock because of the additional management that we have to do in the background. But what it does offer by having a site in the Netherlands is much reduced lead times in end delivery to the 50% of customers in Europe. So, you know, we can do next day into most parts of Germany, obviously Benelux, 2-day services into Southern Europe, you know, so the actual customer experience has actually improved, and also it does reduce the cost of the final mile, which in many cases is one of the most highest cost within the end-to-end supply chain. So that kind of does make it, counteracts what can be some of the additional costs and makes it pretty much cost neutral. So what was the result? Our customer has bonded facilities in the UK and EU. That obviously totally mitigates the risk of double duties. The only time we may need to introduce a slight change is if we really needed to get urgent orders out from, say for instance, the UK warehouse to deliveries in Germany. We can still do that. But we, in a no-deal scenario, we would still have to do the additional admin in terms of commercial invoice, categorization and harmonized codes of the goods, cost of the goods, country of origin, etc., to facilitate a customs clearance with the courier company, which we don't do now. We've got electronic links to do that, so it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, a lot less cross-channel traffic because we're not pushing everything out from the UK, and we're doing that planning. And enhanced customer experience, which is incredibly important to them in terms of lead time and final mile. It's a resilient and flexible supply chain, it's cost neutral, and it's certainly very agile and flexible in terms of managing a no-deal Brexit scenario. And the most important thing for them was it was about that business continuation without any disruption. However, as with any change, there is some challenges. And I think that is the management of the routing. So they have to do that forecasting and that planning to make sure that they do have the right amounts of inventory. There is an additional management overhead of bonded facility and clearance. And there is the potential, obviously, of additional storage costs in a bonded facility. So, you know, nothing comes without a challenge, but this was our sort of process as such for supporting this larger customer to de-risk a no deal and to ensure that they do have that business continuation without disruption within their supply chain. So one of the things I think, just to kind of finalize and finish off here, is that for small, medium-sized businesses, I think it's really about being ready. You know, I read a government paper that only 1 in 4 businesses are ready. And it's, you know, talking to experts like the team on the panel today, who can advise on what is the best route to market or what is the best way to import, and ensuring that you do have the right contracts in place with your suppliers or your customers, ensuring that you know the customs regimes and the administration overheads, and ensuring that you are best positioned to trade with our European partners. So that's it for me, but I hope that just gave you a bit of an idea of some of the solutions that can be put in place, and also some of the challenges and some of the work we do in the background to support our customers.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. I'm going to go straight in now to Susan, and Susan's speciality is taking the dark art of customs and making it interesting and understandable.
Yeah, I shall try to do that. Just going to share. Do anything? Yes. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me and see my screen. I'm going to talk today about 7 strategic blocks. We have lots being said at the moment about operations and operating models, and thanks to Tony for talking about that. But I wanted to follow with some thoughts. Before you get to operations, you need a strategy. And there are some strategic blocks if you don't sort them out to the smooth movement of goods from the 1st of January. And the 7 I've picked up for today are to do with importer of record, duty and tax liabilities, Incoterms, uncertainty about the free trade agreement, the 6 months relief offered in the stage 1 imports by the UK government, CFSP, which is a special customs procedure, and how all that links to customs warehousing. So the first thing we have to consider if we wish to import from the 1st of January into the UK from the rest of the EU is who is the importer. This is something that is often forgotten, but is actually crucial to attempting to get those goods into the country. because before we have to consider what has to be done, we really need to know who has to do it. And there are some rules around that, some legal rules. And to be an importer, you have to be established in the UK. And that legal speak means you need a registered office or central headquarters or a permanent business establishment. That would be where you have staff as well as know-how. And some companies have branches or subsidiaries, but only subsidiaries count because they're legal entities in their own right. They're not just a piece of the parent. So we have to have that first. You need to be a company in the UK to be an importer. If you are such a company, you can apply for special procedures such as the customs warehousing authorization that we were just talking about, and other mitigations for paying duties and taxes, such as inward processing relief and end use, which is now to be called authorized use in the UK. You can make simplified customs declarations. You can become an AEO, a UK AEO from the 1st of January, not the European kind. And you can get a customs guarantee, which you will need for some special customs procedures to help you mitigate the duties and taxes. So these are all very important facilitations that depend on you being counted as established in the UK. Now, we do have many companies today operating trade between Europe and the UK, or within the European Union, and they are registered anywhere you like in Europe. So it could be a French registered company or an Italian, and they can send goods to and fro to the UK as they wish, and also act as an importer in the UK, as long as they have an EORI number. However, from the 1st of January, that will not be true. Those companies would become non-registered UK companies because they're French or German or whatever, and therefore they can't be an importer of record unless they register for VAT, because somehow the import duties and VAT must be accounted for and the government must be able to track them. So they've got to be a registered company of some kind, and registering for VAT and an EORI number is what you can do as a non-UK company. But that, of course, alters some liabilities and stops them taking part in many of the customs simplifications that are going to be essential to the free movement of goods from the 1st of January. By free, I mean the free flow of goods across the border, because those are only available to actually UK established companies. So the first thing you need to do strategically here is consider in your supply chain who is currently acting as your importer. If you are bringing goods to the UK, who is that? Which company is doing that? And that will partly come from your Incoterms that you have in your contract. And I would say that many companies, in my experience, use the Incoterms Ex-Works and DDP, particularly for European trade. Both should be completely deleted from any trade you do from the 1st of January. They are just going to give you pain and cause you chaos. You should remove them completely and opt for others, like FCA or something like that, or BAP, because that way you're going to control your border and have the importer perform the correct duties, do the right role and pay the right duties. Otherwise, you're going to get into trouble with either Ex-Works or DDP at one end or other of your supply chain. So part of the facilitation that the government is offering to people from the 1st of January to make things a little bit easier is they are changing the way that freight agents, customs brokers, the couriers, anyone like that, freight forwarders, they're changing their liabilities. At the moment, you can have two sorts of liability as one of those companies for moving goods. You can have direct representation, and this is where whoever's the importing company has full legal liability for what goes on at the border. Even if they subcontract it to a freight agent, a fast parcels operator, or anyone else, they still hold full legal liability. So whatever that broker or agent gets up to, whatever they put on the paperwork, whatever duties and taxes fall out from that, it is the importer of records' role to be legally liable for that, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It is the importer of records' liability. The other sort of representation you can have at the moment is indirect representation, And this is where the importer record shares that liability with the freight agent, fast parcels operator, whoever they might be, the broker. And that means that each has an equal liability. So if the importer can't pay, they are the first port of call, let's say, perhaps they went out of business while the goods were on the move, then the agent has full liability for the duties and taxes and all the legality of the documentation. Now, understandably, there aren't many agents wishing to offer indirect representation. It gives them such a large liability, particularly in the current situation. However, if you are a non-UK registered company with a UK EORI and VAT number, there is no option. From the 1st of January, you have to have indirect representation and you will be jointly and severally liable with your freight agent, fast parcels carrier. Now, clearly that's causing a lot of freight agents to say we don't want to work with non-UK registered companies from the 1st of January because it's too much risk for our business model, much too much risk. So the facilitation that's been offered is from the 1st of January, and not just for the first 6 months, but the whole year at least. Then they will permit non-UK registered companies to work with freight agents as a direct representative. That is for companies in the UK, you can have a direct representation where you would have had an indirect before, but the agent will not be liable. But this doesn't apply to your non-UK registered importers. They are still going to share indirect representation. There's no get-out clause for a freight agent. So now you've got to think again about who is your importer. Because if your freight agent won't work with them, because they're not a UK registered company and they can't have direct representation, what are they going to do? How are you going to get your goods into country? We've spoken on previous presentations today about free trade agreements with the EU, and I'll just touch on that for customs procedures. Because frankly, for those of us involved in customs work and purely customs work, whether there's a free trade agreement or not is of no relevance whatsoever. It is completely irrelevant to us. Because the customs procedures that are being outlined today, they've already been put out in the board operating model that came out a couple of weeks ago, all 206 pages of detailed reading for those who want it, and Northern Ireland one will come soon. That is controlling what happens paperwork-wise and practicality-wise, but the free trade agreement will have no impact on that at all. We don't really care one way or the other as a customs specialist. The only thing it will change in our customs realm, or might change, is how much duty is paid at import on a particular selection of products based on origin rules. Now, we don't have the origin rules as yet for the UK for the 1st of Jan. That's yet to come to us when the free trade agreement is agreed, if it's agreed. But we do know that if there are origin rules, then certain products will get a reduced amount of duty into the UK, even from that which is shown on the UK general tariff, which we can look up today. Now, of course, again, that will not be relevant to you. If you are one of the 60% of imports that the government says it's 60%, where the duty is zero already on the global UK global tariff. If the duty is zero already, you really have no interest in the free trade agreement whatsoever. So don't worry about it. Move on. It's not relevant. Don't be uncertain. You don't care. So the facilitations in the UK have also put forward this 6 months to lodge a customs entry idea. This is very new, completely unusual, and it says that you may import goods into the UK from the 1st of January and not do a customs entry of any kind. Everybody goes, wow, this is great. Actually, it isn't. You can only do it for standard imports. Now there's a big list of what are controlled imports, which are the opposite, and that includes goods that have anti-dumping on them and countervailing duty. So it's not just wine and spirits and things like that. Actually, it's your everyday bits of pipe and other things that will need, you cannot use this facilitation for. It's also only for compliant traders, and I think this is quite scary. HMRC are going to ring those traders personally who they consider not compliant, who can't use this facilitation. So beware those phone calls. They'll be fun. So it's only for standard imports. It's only for compliant traders. So what are its benefits then? Well, you don't pay duty for 6 months, and this is a rolling 6 months. So if it's January you import, you don't pay till July. If it's February you import, you don't pay till August. So you definitely get cash flow, but only if you're actually going to pay any duty in the first place. If your tariff is 0, there are no cash flow benefits to doing this. So we need to look at that bit first before we go on, and this does not affect VAT. VAT has to be paid separately and differently against postponed VAT accounting if you're VAT registered. So the import or the agent or broker, what do they have to do? What are the issues? Well, they have to be registered for a procedure called Customs Freight Simplified Procedures, CFSP. Sorry, too many acronyms this morning. That's caught me out for a moment, CFSP. Now that, as Tony said, you can't get at the drop of a hat. You have to get that authorisation and go through a lot of hoops to get it. Now, that's all very well for an agent or broker, but what about a trader who also might want to be authorised for CFSP? They should be starting now if they want to get it in time for the 1st of January. It's quite worth having. But you see, if you do the first stage, which is entry in declarant records with no approval required, you then have to do CFSP in 6 months' time. Who are you going to use? Are they ready? Are they willing to do this for you? You can't use this facilitation with special procedures, such as customs warehousing and anything to do with IP. You've got to put this forward very quickly. You've got to put this forward and do a proper entry at the time under a special procedure. You need to record all the details at the time of import that you would have given a freight agent to do the entry. So why not just get the entry done? You've got to estimate your VAT on your next VAT return, the next month or the next quarter, under postponed VAT accounting, and then revisit it later in the year when you do the entry in order to put it right, because you only guessed how much VAT in the first place. So you're going to double up on your VAT effort. You've also got to complete arrival intrasats still on the 21st day following import. There's no get out on that. So you're still going to have systems and documentation in place for that one. You've got to obtain and check the entry from the broker when it's eventually made, and then correct all the details as needed if they need correcting, including your VAT return. So there's quite a lot to do here. For someone who thinks they're getting out with a facilitation doing absolutely nothing for 6 months, actually you've got to do a huge amount, and it may mess up your VAT, and it could mess up quite a lot of things with absolutely no gain. So we need to look into this much more closely than just a headline. And I think that's what I'm talking about here with these strategic blocks. We need to do these before we move on to the headlines of the operational challenge. Now, I know we're running out of time, but the training grants were mentioned earlier, the state aid that we can have for training grants. A new regime has been announced today, this very morning, and they have actually downgraded the amount you can get for the training grant from 2,250 per delegate per course to 1,500 per delegate per course, although the IT and the recruitment grants remain the same. But you have to be a company who's been registered for 12 months in the UK to get them. They'll go back to company registration again. So there's all change there. You can see details in due course, but this is very badly affected by state aid rules, which only allow each company to have up to 200,000 euros of state aid in a given year. And at the moment, if you're receiving COVID aid, such as grants and loans and furlough schemes and all that sort of stuff, that's all going to be counted to the 200,000 euros. And that may mean you're not eligible for these grants at all now, because you've already had that amount of money over the last, since March. So a lot to look into there on the new rules. So I will end there, and hopefully that's given you an idea of the strategic requirements for importing into the UK.
Brilliant, thank you, Susan. I think there's a lot of food for thought there. even I hadn't thought about the fact that the furlough and maybe the small business bounce back loans and things like that are all going to count towards your EU state aid. So I think that's a really important point. Now it gives me pleasure to invite Serafina from Logistics Compare, who's going to give us her thoughts on how Brexit is going to impact the warehousing industry, and also a little bit about Logistics Compare, our host for today. You there, Serafina?
Yes, I'm coming in. Sorry, just give me. Let me see if I can manage to share it. Let's go. Can you everybody see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep. Okay. All right. So thank you, Sue, for the introduction, and also for all the talks so far. So yes, Brexit and impact on logistics. So far, what we have seen that clearly Brexit is going to have a significant impact on the supply chain. Impact in terms of potential tariffs and costs and customs procedures, which will imply extra measures to put in place. Workforce shortage, and as Peter said, there will be quite a lot in the UK, thinking that about 10% of the drivers in the UK are from EU, and about 20% are from EU. 20% of the warehouse workforce are again from EU origin. In addition to that, will be required some systems upgrade and training to staff that will need to manage over 210 million customs declaration at a cost of over £7 billion per year. So these are only some of the impacts that Brexit will have. But one of the impacts which I want to talk today is about the impact of delay of moving the goods across the border. So this has been, I should say, especially last year, the main reason why companies have stockpiled. So let me actually put this one on the screen. I have stockpiled. So what's happened is that when we are talking about stockpiling by its own nature, it's a short-term solution. It's a short-term solution which allows customers to have some buffer stock to be able to supply their customers in case of delays at customs. But what is important with of course, stockpiling is what we say, location, 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 meaning what? Meaning it's important how you position your inventory. It is important that your inventory is strategically located because they will drive cost savings, faster deliveries, and most of all will improve your processes, your logistics operations. But let's go more in details into this. So when we are talking about cost savings, we need to think already that the last mile delivery it counts for 41% of the total cost for moving the goods. It's basically twice more the cost or the percentage of all the other categories. So this is why it's so crucial to ensure that your inventory is really located in a strategic position. Also, the other thing that I want to mention here is that what we have noticed nowadays is that, retailers or even transport organizations, they actually charging companies less than what they are paying for to fulfill the orders. That means what? That you really need to be careful of this cost because customers basically are not really willing to pay for this extra cost for extra services. In the UK, only 1% of this cost, of full cost, I should say, are paid by the customers. So this is why, you know, keep an eye on your distribution cost. And again, what we're saying, this is what would be pretty much the base of making sure your inventory is strategically located. The other point is about making sure your supply, your customers, to meet their requirements. I mean, this surveys, what it shows is that when given all these different options of method of delivery, what we can see here that 61% they were going for same-day delivery, followed by the 2-hour delivery in the next day. I mean, long gone now the days where people are happy to take the 3 days. Those days are already gone. Nowadays, customers clearly want faster deliveries. So, and again, this can be achieved when you are stockpiling in the right place, when your inventory is actually located in the right location. I wanted just to take this, I want to show something else here, because some of our customers, what we have observed that some of our customers, they do have warehouses which they are saying are big enough to take on board the extra stockpiling or any other build-up inventory due to increased demand or whatever, which may come, I don't know, from Christmas or Black Friday or whatever. But what we have noticed that, you know, there is, so what we're watching here is that their warehouse space across the year is not fully utilized. So basically, if you watch this chart, between February and March, they had about 40% of the space was vacant. So what we are saying to the customers, instead of having such a dead space and extra cost, because you still pay for that space, the best way is to make sure you actually rent this space out and generate extra revenue. So I just want to quickly give a few takes. First of all, it is important nowadays that we drive really a flexible and agile supply chain. And when we are talking about flexible and agile supply chain, we need to start to think in terms of moving from a just-in-time supply chain to just-in-case. So that's how agile your supply chain need to be nowadays. The other point to consider is exploring onshoring sourcing opportunities. I mean, nowadays quite few medium and small companies, they actually already adopting this method, but simply because they're trying to save in cost. But with Brexit, the idea of running a parallel supply chain, which is based locally, will help them to avoid all these customs delays, which we have been talking about. And then, of course, we are talking, as we've been talking until now, make sure your warehouse is located in the right position. And don't forget, of course, your distribution costs, because those distribution costs can really put a big hole in your pocket. And finally, what we are saying is, if you need to, make sure you invest in new talent, in new resources, because these are people which can bring new changes to your business, can drive new opportunities, bring new opportunities. And that would be money, I think, in my mind, very well invested. So that's enough for me. I'm gonna give a short presentation, even because I'm quite aware of the time today. And so we can leave a bit of time for question and answers, I think.
Okay, brilliant. Now I have a question from Amanda, and Amanda's from the City Business Library, and obviously they support SMEs in particular. And the question is, what impact, and this is to all the panelists, what impact do you feel Brexit will have on the SME supply chain? Should they start looking at other countries? And are there considerations for this, especially in looking at maybe having a worsening supply chain that in developing companies that relies upon low-cost labour and the other problems that we're hearing at the moment through sweatshirts and sweatshops and things like that in India. So I don't know who wants to take that from the panelists.
It's a lot of questions, but I can maybe try and break it down a little. I think impact on SME supply chains, yes, there will be an impact. And I think that's why we're here today to kind of point out some of those. And I think it really is about looking at where you're importing from or what your customer base is, and ensuring that, you know, you've got the right setup as much as you possibly can, and speaking with rather us other SMEs, talking to organizations that are on here today, and doing your research, because it will have an impact, and even from sort of sending a small parcel to truckloads, potentially in a no deal situation, there will be an impact. I think there is a global opportunity, you know, especially if trade deals do happen with countries outside of Europe. And, you know, we, even at this stage, have took 3 or 4 SMEs actually into the US and into China from an e-com perspective, and also into marketplaces like Amazon. So look beyond Europe, there is a big world out there, and I think it's the right thing to do. In terms of sourcing in, should we say, you know, Asia, Southeast Asia, yes, most people are already, and again, good to look there. Is there going to be a case of worsening exploitation or in developing countries? Potentially, and I think that's the risk. And I think it is down to the sort of ethics and the due diligence that that company does when they're sourcing. And we quite often will use organisations like Bureau Veritas or SGS or QIMA to do factory audits on behalf of our customers. It's pretty inexpensive, and they will do a full audit on that factory in terms of working the conditions, health and safety, finance, quality of product, ability to produce, workflows, and everything else. So I think it's a good idea that if you want to ensure that you are ethically sourcing as much as you possibly can, it's always good to do an audit on the factory. And most freight forwarders who would be importing on your behalf will have rather an agent network or local offices, and it doesn't harm to speak with them and say, what's your experience of this factory, or can you at least have a chat and review and come back to me? So that would be my answer to those questions. So hopefully I covered them all.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. That's really interesting. I think, Susan, your point about not using this 6 months is a really interesting one, because of course, obviously the natural instinct is if you've got 6 months not to pay something, not to do it. And I think your view about getting the best procedures and think where you're operating from the beginning is really important. And I think that really does lend itself to the SME model, because they don't want to end up having 2 systems. Is that something you would agree with?
Absolutely, because SMEs are no different to anyone else. The only different customs rules we have is for parcels under £135 in value. Otherwise, sort of normal rules will apply that we've been talking about. So it's very important for an SME who is going to be very tight on cash, presumably, very tight on people and resources, to actually understand this. And I think what's not being said at the moment, though the government message is out there, you need a freight agent, go and find yourself an intermediary. Well, that's all very well. They cost money too. And how do you judge what good they are for you if you actually have no idea what they do, or how they do it, or what it means to you and your liability? I think the first thing an SME needs to do is upskill, is find out about some of this customs work, find out what it means for them and what their legal liabilities are. It sounds boring, but actually it's very practical and very operational. And then they can move forward and make these choices. Don't just take the headline off of a newspaper. A, they're often wrong because their people are reporters, they're not customs specialists. And B, there's a lot of permutations to this as to whether a thing is of any use to you or it isn't. So you need to be very aware of that and upskill yourself so you've some idea what's going on.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up now because I'm mindful we are over time. And a lot of people are saying, well, is there going to be an agreement or isn't there going to be an agreement at the end of this? And there's a really interesting articles that have been appearing in The Spectator of what they think is going to be the workaround. And it's going to be done, in their view, in this way. So to get the level playing field, the UK has repeatedly said it simply cannot accept them. Michael Gove has already emphasised that the UK would be prepared to accept tariffs rather than an agreement with the EU wants in this area. But the UK does offer up a potential compromise. A deal could declare that the UK has the sovereign right to move away from the EU's level playing field should it choose to. But if it did, the EU would have the rights to impose tariffs on goods. This would allow both sides to claim satisfaction. Johnson could say that the UK has a right to chart its own course without being bound by the EU rules, while Brussels can point out that it has the tools to respond to any UK attempt to undercut it. If you want to read the article, I'm going to put the link in the chat, but it's very interesting. And it might just lead us to a way out of all this bits and pieces. And my final thought is something that we came up with when we did a fireside chat last week, which is the politicians will get the solution that they enable. So I hope you've enjoyed our seminar this afternoon. Look forward to the next one and come and join us. And there will be a recording of this on YouTube, which Martin has sent out the link to everybody. Have a good afternoon, everybody, and stay safe. Thank you also to all our panelists. It's been an excellent session. Thank you.
Thank you.